Welcome to Design Talk Stockholm. Today we have a visitor, Michel Peters, and we will talk about designs and multimodality. Hi, Michel.
Hello.
Can you just introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm a Canadian educator and researcher living and working in Madrid, Spain, where I've been living for the past 5 years, engaging with questions of education and communication. And I'm principally interested in the transformations that are happening in the communications landscape that is impacted with the rise of a digital culture, with the network society, and looking at how these transformations impact teaching and learning.
How did you come into the field of design and multimodality?
I began working in this area when I began a master's in media design for learning. So looking at the relationship between digital media and learning, the digital media and learning movements, and I was very much interested by media literacy when I was doing my master's. And from this perspective, I got interested in multiliteracies, the multiliteracies movement, which stands for multiple and multimodal literacies. And from then I became interested in the work of Kress and a social semiotic approach to communication, to contemporary communication. And the program that I work in Madrid, the doctoral program, is called Education and Communication in Digital Learning Environments. So it links the role of communication in learning.
Well, it seems like you have mapped the field globally.
Part of my work was doing a global mapping of multimodal activity that's looking at researchers, looking at research groups, academic programs that look at the relationship between multimodal communication and learning. Some interesting trends that we can see. Australia has been a hub of multimodal communication from the time of Michael Halliday and his influence on linguistics and then social semiotics. From there, we see movement to the UK and the MODE group with Gunther Kress. There's a lot of activity in North America and the USA, Bill Cope and Mary Kalantzis, and of course the Designs for Learning group here in Sweden, which has brought me here today. All engaging with the relationship between social semiotics, multimodal communication, and learning, and the central role that design plays in new learning environments. Having this map, this global map, also helps to understand the role of globalization, the impact that globalization has on learning movements, academic movements in the world, and sort of sets the scene for how this very new field of study, multimodality, in relationship to learning, we're talking about a field that is 20 years old. So it's very much in its infancy and has a lot of room to grow. So it's interesting to see how it plays out in a global context.
Yeah, it seems like it develops theoretically in different directions and also in terms of fields of investigations like education or medical treatment,
Communication,
youngsters, communication, or whatever.
digital learning environments, absolutely. I mean, principally, a lot of people are using this framework in doing research in digital environments. So I mean that's the range of all sorts of different activities and behaviors. But I'm interested in it from a learning perspective, looking at how it relates to teaching and learning in the digital culture.
Could you say a few more words about your specific interest in your study for the moment being?
Sure. Well, the theoretical framework that I'm using is as you can see here, a connection between a pedagogy of multiliteracies, which looks at the pedagogical implications of multiliteracies, Kress's social semiotic approach to multimodal communication, which is very much sort of a theoretical branch moving towards social semiotics, and a Designs for Learning theoretical perspective developed here in Sweden with the Designs for Learning group. All of these, some of the central ideas in this work is looking at teachers as designers of learning environments and looking at learning from a design perspective and also looking at learning sequences and how teachers are designers of these learning sequences and students are also designers of their own learning and how they use signs to indicate learning and how teachers can view these signs and these transformations of sign-making activities as evidence of learning. So this is, for me, in a digital communications environment, I think it's a very interesting analytical framework to use to explore teaching and learning.
And could you say a few more words of what does it help you to do in terms of methods and tools to do this
Sure. Well,
investigation?
I think this multimodal approach can be used as sort of a toolkit for as a research method. No, in the classroom. In my case, I'm doing a case study. I'm doing an exploratory research in the classroom, field observations. Most higher education today operates in a blended learning environment. So there's the face-to-face element in the classroom, and you can use this framework to analyze learning sequences in face-to-face environments, in terms of observing, in terms of collecting data, analyzing data, but also you can use it in digital environments such as Moodle and learning management systems as sort of an analytical framework to collect data, to analyze data, to observe learning sequences, as your group has defined it, these learning design sequences, and to explore learning from this angle as a design perspective.
So a lot of interest is on communication and learning.
I think the relationship. I think I come from the assumption that learning is a social act, that socio-constructivist perspective, and I think that's the Designs for Learning theoretical perspective is sort of a mixture of that, a socio-constructivist and a social semiotic approach. I think collaborative learning and interaction is a very important part of learning, where students make meaning through communication together around a certain learning task, around a learning design, and for me that's incredibly important. I think in the digital learning environment, there are affordances. There's a lot of, it allows for a lot of interaction in these learning environments, and it's a way to sort of study and understand how learning happens in digital environments. I think this theoretical framework works in a response to an older view of what learning is. This transmission pedagogy based on memorization, repetition, imitation, and this framework prioritizes the role of knowledge making, knowledge representation, knowledge transformation, not simply receiving knowledge and repeating it at a certain time in an exam or in a formalized learning task or environment, but transforming and creating new knowledge and applying that to real world contexts. I mean, I think these are important skills that are critical today in the 21st century.
Absolutely, and I absolutely agree. And it also seems that redesign is an interesting concept when we talk about what learners are doing. Then comes the tricky question: how do we evaluate? How do we recognize something as learning or something as knowledge valid in the field? Because it seems that we have to expand and develop our understanding of how to evaluate.
Yeah, the question of assessment is central to learning, and I do not claim to have the answers, but I think assessment is a massive issue. But I think that one of the affordances, this is a key term in multimodality, an affordance, an action possibility. One of the affordances of digital learning environments is that it allows for recursive feedback, formative assessment, as opposed to the summative assessment culture that we live in. No standardized test, standardization. I think this ability to have a feedback loop going in between students and teacher, but also between students and students, and this provides for real sort of learning opportunity, a lot of cognition, metacognitive learning opportunities through this recursive feedback that can happen in digital learning environments, as well as in face-to-face learning environments.
Oh, yeah.
I think formative assessment is a very important part of a Designs for Learning approach. Often in education faculties, we're very preoccupied with how to teach.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be talking about how students learn and how learning happens. And that's why I think this learning design approach is important. Teaching students skills of lifelong learning, to keep them actively and engaged in the learning process. And I think a lot of that, the key element of multimodal communication is meaning making. And I think we need to make education meaningful for students. And I think this perspective allows for that, allows students to communicate more fully and understand the communications environment they live in, and allows them to make sense of education in a more meaningful, clear way.
So it seems to be at least two trends. One is towards more meaning making in the school and the learning context, and one is more control, more competitive studies, more.
Absolutely, the neoliberal market logic has definitely been integrated into the higher education landscape, in education in general, but in the higher education more specifically. 30% of admissions in the world are in the private university sector, and that is only growing. And a lot of these trends point to lowering of academic standards, demand absorbing, where the private sector is taking in the students that are not accepted into the public sector, more standardization, movement of control away from faculty and teachers, autonomy and control over what they're teaching, and moving it to CEOs and managers, which are working on economic logic. I think these are immense challenges for pedagogy and higher education today, and something that we need to try to defend. We need to try to defend public education and teachers as designers of their own learning environments and autonomous actors in education. I think that's fundamentally important and an immense challenge that we face.
Thank you very much. I think it was most thrilling.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.